Good afternoon, everyone. This is the October 14th, 2021 meeting of the Long Range Development Oversight Committee. And may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez. She's not present. And then Chair Friedman.
Present. We do have a quorum, so we will go on to preliminary matters. Item 2A. I would like to have our new Community Development Director, Eli Isaacson, come on and introduce yourself. This is your first meeting of the Long Range Development Team, so welcome. And please introduce yourself and tell the public a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Chair Friedman. It's a pleasure to be here today. As you mentioned, this is in fact my first LDTO meeting, so I'm excited to participate in this. I've been here at the City of Santa Barbara since the end of July as the Community Development Director. I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of members of our local development community, whether it's architects, contractors, or property owners, and I look forward to meeting more people over the coming months. So thank you for having me, and I hope to speak with a lot of you soon.
Great, thank you and welcome. Very glad to have you on board and be a part of this process in particular going forward. It's very important to our community and glad to have you here. Any other announcements? Not hearing any. I will go to item B, which is the draft minutes from June 30th in 2021. And do we have a motion to approve the minutes or any additions and corrections? Councilmember Jordan?
I'll move to approve.
Great, I will second. And is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to the minutes? Please raise your hand in the app now. Not hearing any, I'll close public comment. And may we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez, still not here. And then Chair Friedman.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
The minutes are approved. And so now we will come to item 2C, which is comments from the public pertaining to matters not on the agenda. So this is the time for any members of the public wishing to speak to items under the purview of the Long Range Development Oversight Committee that are not on today's agenda. So I will open it up now for public comment. And if there is any member, please raise your hand in the app. And Ms. Kokinda, can you monitor that? Is there anyone wishing to speak?
Absolutely. So I have Mr. Fred Sweeney. I'm going to unmute you. And if we could go, if I could ask Ms. Brooke to go to the public comment slide and just to let others know how they can participate if they wish to do so. So Mr. Sweeney, I've just unmuted you and you have 2 minutes to speak whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. Mr. Chair and Mr. Jordan. I assume you can hear me, so I will start. You did receive a very detailed package from me, I believe. It's an in the weeds detail thing about various things that I've experienced over my 10 years serving on the Single Family Design Board and as a practicing architect for almost 40 years. I'll let you go through that. I'd like to give you some 30,000-foot comments. One is because of SB 9, I think there's some homework that I assume either is going to be done or should be done with regards to things that attribute to the Single Family Design Board. First of all, single family is now probably a misnomer. We may need to rethink the title of that board and then also to clarify what that board is really going to be reviewing given the criteria of SB 9. There are 3 other chapters in the ordinance that may need to be revisiting. Chapter 22.69, the definition of the Single Family Design Board and its duties. Chapter 22.69.50, neighborhood preservation findings. And chapter 22.76, view dispute resolutions, all of which have to do with neighborhood compatibility. And as I've shared with you many times, that's not definitively defined in any of the code documents that we work with. And that may need some revisiting in some detail. I was just a few minutes ago reviewing an appeal before the City Council earlier in the week, and it had a lot to do with neighborhood compatibility, and yet the neighborhood was not definitively defined by the Single Family Design Board, only by staff. So if we're going to go to administrative reviews with no oversight by review boards, I think that's going to need some attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney, and also appreciate your comments regarding exit interviews for, and part of the package you send us, exit interviews for former board members as they step down.
I also just added both of our agenda briefs today. There is a date that escapes me in November or early December where council will be reviewing staff's work on SB9, the impacts, and how to claw back some local control. So that's coming also to full council.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. And any further members of the public wish to speak, Ms. Kokinda?
Not at the moment. I do want to just say that if you wish to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. A raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down. I don't see anyone at the moment, but I do just want to acknowledge Mr. Sweeney's written correspondence that was distributed to the subcommittee yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. Seeing that there are not seeing any further additional public comment, we will close public comment and move on to the heart of our agenda today. And I will turn this item over to Ms. Brooke.
Thank you, Chair Friedman. While I still have this slide up, just to give a preview of what's coming up for the rest of this meeting, the presentation will be shared between myself and Tina Dye, the Chief Building Official. Actually, and as we start off on the next part of this agenda, as we give you a very brief update on some recent land development team process improvements, I will turn it over to Ms. Dye for the first couple of slides.
Good afternoon, Chair Friedman and committee members. I'm Tina Dye, Chief Building Official, and I'm happy to present a couple of process improvements that staff's been working on over the last few months. We've developed some new communication tools to help our customers easily understand and walk through the process of planning and building permit applications. So part of this process is that we created one consolidated building permit application form. So there are less forms for an applicant to upload into ACA. And before they'd have to upload a handful, which could be tedious. And we've, all of the new forms are PDFs, so they're fillable and with electronic signature options, which is a major time saving for our applicants. And there's a new building permit application guide, which has frequently asked questions and permit review timelines and graphics about the building permit process. And we've also developed a 3-minute instructional video that's on our website to help applicants learn about the new forms and answer any questions they might have. Next slide, please. And also in an effort to create a common visual language between our divisions, Building and Planning and Safety worked on a common aesthetic for all of our forms. And we've also created some helpful joint submittal guidelines and for use of both planning and building processes for various project types. As we know, the permit process can be challenging and confusing, and this is a very helpful tool for our customers. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Brooke.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Dye. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. I'm Renee Brooke. I'm the city planner. I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon. So I'll cover one primary update to our land development process that we made since our last meeting in June. Maybe one that's not one that we've made, but one that we hope to make regarding public noticing In our meeting in June, I covered a lot of different updates that we had made to the land development process throughout all the divisions and departments. And we talked a lot about public noticing in that June meeting, and the Land Development Team Oversight Committee directed staff, strongly recommended that we enhance our public noticing in a variety of ways. We have already started to renotice neighbors and interested parties prior to a project being scheduled for project design approval at design review. That was something that came out of the June meeting. So that's already been done. Another thing that we are working on is trying to streamline our public notices so that the most critical information is getting out to neighbors and interested parties. As you can see on the slide, side-by-side example of our existing public notice on the left. It's this orange postcard material. It's half page, half of a typical size page, cardstock material that has information about the public hearing, the location, the project description. And then I'm just going to flip to the back side, and then I'll come back to this slide. This is then the back side of our existing notice on the left, which is very text heavy. A lot of information. Probably most people don't read it. So the really critical information gets lost, we believe. So what we'd like to move toward is the prototype on the right, which first has, I think, a more friendly presentation, notice to the neighbor. We have the basic project information, and then a QR code that people can scan to take them to the meeting agenda and the project plans and get more information if they want more information about the project. And then the back side would have clear, easy, readable, digestible information about how to participate and the different ways you can participate and stay informed about this project. So we hope that that meets the objective of both your committee members, staff, applicants, and interested parties, so that we get them the most critical information. We've pared it down to what is required for state and local regulations, and hoping to launch this soon once we decide on some formatting or some colors and materials for the actual notice. So that's our major update to the committee since June. And so I'll keep continuing through the agenda items. Oh, yes, Chair Friedman.
Oh, I was going to say we possibly have a break right now for questions before we get into the customer experience survey.
Sounds
and
great.
then we'll go through the survey and then have the final questions afterwards. So at this point, we'll just open up for questions from my colleagues. And Councilmember Jordan, see your light is on, or your camera's on.
Hey, Ms. Brooke, could you go back a slide to the front? So I guess the only question I have here with all that open space, two questions. And that was one, really pummeling somebody to go somewhere or face an appeal that means nothing. Like, you know, you're familiar with what I mean. And so I'm just wondering if to get to the back page with all that space, you can't find a bold sentence that says turnover for your way to provide input, or turnover for to participate or something. And then part of the whole, and so we don't need to tell them when the last or best time is, because this mailing would be coinciding with the last best time, right? Or the first best time, right? I'm not using my words very well. You'll know better what I mean.
Correct. Assuming that we keep noticing as we do now, most currently, as of in the last couple of months, when a project requires a mailed notice, one would go out the very first time it's being heard by a discretionary body, and then prior to it being scheduled for project design approval. If it requires decisions by multiple decision-making bodies, a notice would also go out.
Okay.
The first time for each.
But if the design approval was multiple hearings, we would say, I think, we would say we've sufficed by letting you know that first hearing that was going to be a benchmark. And if they continued it, then it's your responsibility to follow the continuation, right? We don't have
Correct.
to keep
That's what we
mailing. Yeah.
discussed in June, right? And
Yeah.
because at that point in the project, it's been deemed complete. We do have permit streamlining requirements we need to keep up with. So the project likely would not languish for too long, and an interested party hopefully would be able to keep up with the hearings that should come pretty soon if it's
Okay.
continued.
So I'm not going to design this for you, but I'm just looking for really something that jumps out at somebody and says, you know, basically you have no excuse not to notice what's on the backside of how to be involved, kind of thing. And, you know, really just in their face kind of thing is that, because you just hear so often, whether right or wrong, justifiably or not, that people didn't know. And so you could hold that thing up and say, I don't know what other language we could use to tell you to make sure that you paid attention and went and looked at it. So whatever you can do to that to help with that,
Yep.
I think.
Definitely appreciate that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. And Ms. Brooke, just you touched on it, but if you could also talk about specifically the change that we've done in terms of noticing for when the project comes to project design approval. Based on a couple of projects that happened, and my understanding is we have updated our noticing for those types of projects. A second round of noticing, if you could just articulate what that is for the public. Thank you.
Oh, certainly. So prior to just a few months ago, we were noticing projects at the very first time that would be going to some type of a public hearing. So the very first opportunity for the public to participate, a notice would go out if a project triggered a mailed notice, because not every project does. And then it was up to the interested party to let us know that they wanted to keep being informed of subsequent hearings. If they didn't do that, they might not get another notice all the way through the rest of the project, even when it was scheduled for project design approval or final approval. And so in the last few months, we've added at least a second time that a mailed notice would go out to property owners and tenants within 300 feet of the project, and anybody who asked to be noticed about subsequent meetings. And then after that notice, they get an email notice with the meeting agenda for all the other hearings. But like we were saying, at that point, the timeline between hearings is fairly short. So it's easier to keep track. Whereas before, one of the challenges we talked about is if a project has an extended time period, might be a year between the two public hearings, and people have moved and come and left and didn't know about the project being proposed in their neighborhood. So this hopefully will help not only keep people involved, but at the right time in the project decision-making point, so that if they have concerns, they're getting involved at the right time.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. So that's a big improvement because the project design approval is such a key component in terms of the neighbors being involved and the right time to appeal something if they should choose to council. And that is when you're really analyzing the project. And so to have that extra round of noticing is helpful for the neighbors and avails them of their opportunities to participate in a project. So I'm glad we've made that change, and we'll see how it works going forward.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
With that, can continue on. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll get into the meat of the meeting agenda now. At our last meeting in June, we talked about how we wanted to do some customer outreach. So in response to the Novak report and a lot of internal discussions and just information we've known for a while about the need to make some improvements to the land development process, we started implementing some of those changes going back to last summer, 2020. Even a little bit before that, when you think about switching to online submittals in March, April of 2020. But we thought enough time had gone by for us to check in with our customers and find out how some of these changes are working for them or not working for them. Did we focus on the right areas of improvement first? And we've gone through a lot of changes, and I'll just cover really quickly on this next slide some of the more high-level changes that have been made to the land development process since last summer. And these, I tried to pick out the changes that a customer might actually notice, because a lot more has happened behind the scenes in terms of adopting or amending policies or some procedures that the customer may not actually notice. But Since the shift to online application submittal in April of last year, concurrent permit plan review by staff. At the same time, we switched to remote public hearings, which we're still having. We offered on-demand building permits and remote inspections. We adopted land development team mission and vision statements. In the last year, we've updated the stormwater management program. We recommitted to staff attending all of the necessary meetings with applicants and internal meetings during project review. We initiated virtual counter appointments and have gone back and forth between providing in-person counter services as public health orders have allowed. We implemented new planning applications and guides and tutorial videos on our website, and we have done what we can without amending the municipal code to find a single entry point into the discretionary review process. So these are just some of the big things. So it was worthwhile. We want to check in with our customers on how these changes have been working for them. And so we launched an online customer survey. Let me just switch my notes here. So it was available for about 11 days from September 17th to the 28th. We first contracted with Robert Tenike, who's a communications specialist and has worked with the city on several other surveys we've done and public outreach efforts. So we worked for many weeks massaging these questions to make sure that they were objective and really getting at the points that we wanted to. Launched a website with some information about the land development team. Why are we reaching out to our customers? Because we've implemented a number of changes and it was time to take a pulse from our customers of what direction we're going and are we focusing on the right aspects that really are helping them. We provided the survey online both in English and Spanish. And after being open for that time period, we received 209 responses and they were completely anonymous. People didn't have to give us their email address if they didn't want to. Some did because they indicated that they wanted to continue to stay informed about future updates to land development process, or perhaps so that we could contact them to follow up more on their survey responses. This web address here that you're seeing on the screen is still live. The web page is still up because we intend to keep adding information to it, and the survey results in total are posted on that website too if anyone's interested to see what came of the survey. What we're going to do today is provide just very high level overview of the survey responses. One, because it's only been a short time since the survey's closed, so we haven't been able to fully dig into it, but we intend to do that. But we wanted to communicate with the Land Development Team Oversight Committee what we've heard so far, and then get your input on how to continue to engage with our customers. So I'm going to run through these slides fairly quickly because I know we only have a short time today. There will be some natural breaking points through the slides where I'll ask for questions as it makes sense by topic. So you'll see those prompts when we get through a few of the subjects. We'll take a break. Just first off, wanted to give you some demographic information about the responses that we received from the survey. So we asked them, when was your first experience with the land development process? How many years ago did you first experience interacting with land development staff? And interestingly enough, almost half of them had their first experience at least 11 years ago, all the way up to over 20 years ago. So some really long time customers of the land development process. And then just over half were somewhere between less than a year ago to 10 years ago. So that was really interesting to see. We got a good mix of what we've been calling our frequent flyers, or people who are pretty familiar with the process, and those who might be fairly new. Next was, how frequently do you interact with the land development team, or have you interacted with the land development team? And I do want to say, I forgot to mention, we did targeted outreach to customers who have had business with the land development team since last summer. That was about 1,200 direct emails to those customers asking them to please take the survey. We also did a land development team bulletin and city news and brief, and as many ways that we could get the word out about the survey, we tried to get that response. So in terms of frequency of interacting with the LDT since last summer, pretty frequent. Again, got a lot of our frequent flyers, more than 10 times, 41% have interacted with this process more than 10 times in the last 14 months or so. So that's pretty good. And then combined, 78% have had at least 3 experiences with the land development team. And then we wanted to understand the primary role in the process. And this was interesting. About 47% of them were some type of design professional or architect. And also good to see that about 22% of them were homeowners. And we divided them up as to whether they prepared their own application or had someone prepare it for them. Those are very different users in our system, knowledge of the land development process. So that was important for us to know. But the key takeaway from here is just really the broad spectrum of respondents that answered the survey. So we're happy to see that we're able to get that diversity there. So some overarching themes. These next couple of slides are pretty high level takeaways from the survey. Generally, what we heard from our customers is they need to know that the city genuinely wants to create a better process. So we might need to do some more work in that regard, letting them know that we want to help them, we want to make the process smoother for them. Also, that customers, we get the sense that they want an experience that's similar to other customer-focused brands in their lives. Maybe private companies that they're used to working with, like Amazon or Apple, who have a customer care department and give you really that personalized service. So understanding that that's an expectation and experience they have in their lives, they bring that even to interacting with the public sector. So we need to have an understanding of that expectation. And interestingly here, 2 different perspectives on how we could provide better customer service. Some people want easier access to in-person services and really have those services stay pretty robust, in the thinking that they'd get faster and more consistent responses. And then there's another function or sector of our respondents who want the virtual experience so robust that they don't actually need in-person services. So 2 different types of customers here. And so this gives us some food for thought in terms of how we improve our services when we've got customers who want both. Some want more in-person, some are fine with virtual, but there's also room for improvement there too. So through the questions, we had both multiple choice questions and a few open-ended questions, and they more or less came down into one of these 10 key themes that we'll cover, Tina and I will cover over the next few slides. So just putting them here for you. And as I mentioned, we'll take some breaks through some of these topics to give you a chance to answer or ask any questions you have. So one of the last open-ended questions we asked on our survey was, overall, what's your experience with these changes in the last 14 months? And the top responses were pretty mixed. Some felt like some of the changes made the process more complicated or time-consuming. Some felt like having less in-person engagement created its own challenges. Some believe that some of these changes had no effect, but we did hear pretty strongly that many of the online services are working. So very mixed. And again, this is why we want to dig deeper into both the survey data and follow up with our customers so we can better understand what's meant by some of these responses. The very last question on our survey was, if you could change one thing about the land development process, what would it be? So it was open-ended. We tried to group them into topics topics that are of similar flavor. These 5 here were the most common topics once we did that and grouped them together. Pretty strong desire to see some changes to the design review process. We've heard that. Also streamlining the land development process, simplifying. So streamlining, simplifying, big theme throughout the survey, and a desire for increased in-person services, and to what's called here is improved staff attitude and teamwork, and we can dig into that deeper. I think we need to dig into that a little bit more. It might be just that sense of, are staff really there to help me? And that sense of, are they trying to help me? That's my takeaway when there's mentions of attitude, behavior, or teamwork. It's that feeling of, we're not trying to be an obstacle. We really are trying to help you. And so that might be an area we can improve. It's seeming like it's an area where we can improve. And then we asked a couple questions about in-person versus virtual services, because with the pandemic, we were forced into providing more virtual services. We already had, of course, email and phone, but a lot more taking place via email and phone, and information on our website, and eventual transition to virtual counter services through GoToMeeting. We asked them, what are the top activities you would prefer to do in person, even if you had the choice of doing it virtually? And typically it came back as because they needed to communicate with multiple staff, might be easier to do that in person. Have a specific question, they have a general question. So again, pretty interesting there, just depending on who the user might be. And that might be something we'd find out more as we dig into the data a little bit more. And then those who want to view, whether it's archive plans or project plans that are not easily viewed or can't be viewed online. Continuing with the in-person versus virtual services, of the respondents, about a quarter of them said that virtual services have been working for all of their needs. More than half indicated that having 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week access to submitting applications online was the most beneficial aspect of virtual services. And that we see through many other of the questions on the survey. The switch to online application submittal overwhelmingly is viewed as positive, although there's room for improvement, and we'll cover that in another slide. And about 15% say that there's been no benefit to virtual services. They still prefer in person. And then in terms of perceptions of the virtual services, about a quarter feel that our email or phone response takes too long to get back to them. Sometimes it's difficult to talk to the right person or get in touch with the right person right away in a virtual setting. And then about 14% said it's hard to find information on our website. So that could be an area for improvement. So one of the takeaways we might get from all of this feedback on in-person versus virtual service is, first, maybe we need to do more educating to our customers about what services we provide online or through remote counter meetings, because in reading some of the survey responses, I got a sense, and even in the open-ended questions, they weren't aware that we are physically in the building and at the counter. You can walk in and interact with staff at the counter, and it seemed like maybe they weren't aware of that. So we might need to do some more education around that. And then also put some more resources into helping them do things online. For those who want to do things online, we need to improve our instructions and make it easier to get information online. And then just one more on this topic. Specific to counter services, we asked them what would be one change that you would want to make to counter services in general. And again, the theme being more staff time, just more availability to make contact with staff at the counter, more training among staff at the counter to get consistent answers, better communication, and again, that attitude, teamwork coming up again. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and see if there's any questions from the committee on that section of survey topics.
Thank you, Ms. Brooke. Councilmember Jordan.
Feel bad making you just talk to a empty screen. I hope you're okay with that. So there's so few of us, maybe I'll just stay on. I wrote some notes, so I don't remember what order they're in. I can't tell you how much I like just your presentation and the smile on your face when you're talking about some of the accomplishments. Just so, whatever, we've known each other long enough that I know when you're committed, you're enthusiastic, you're behind it, and that's exactly what you're saying when you're talking about some of this stuff. We'll get to the challenge stuff later, I'm sure, but the stuff you're working on and stuff, particularly the recognition of these are what I wrote down, what I paraphrase them to, and that's the tension on whether we're working to assist or working just to work, and that one of my frequent problems in life when I get in that situation is not finding a person who will take ownership of their process. And I think that's probably not news to you, that that's something to probably work on, that whole concept of we're there to help, we're not there to just not help. And part of that is for somebody to take ownership of that process. See, and then I had a question on the design review process. So that was the number one response was change the design review process. But what does change mean? Is there any clue on that, or was that just a bullet that was checked that we want change?
Thank you, Committee Member Jordan. So that was one of the open-ended questions. So what we lumped into that one bullet of change the design review process was made up of many different comments, some of which are, I'm thinking, I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but what I'm remembering, a few of them being, reduce the purview of some of the design review boards. Don't make me have to go to design reviews often, speed up the process, less hearings, various aspects of the design review process. And
Okay.
Again, we can view those open-ended questions and get into them in more specificity later in the coming weeks.
Okay, then my last question, I think, was we all know the city website's a dog, and we're working on fixing it. And so I'm just wondering, I've been ignoring the prompts to even, put my own input in, but now I realize maybe I've had too many jobs and I should be putting my input in. But I'm just wondering, in terms of traffic, do you have any idea in traffic on the website, how much traffic of the overall traffic goes to community development?
We do. We have pulled those analytics. I don't know off the top of my head, but we are able to do that. We're able to see what pages get the most traffic and where people click or what they click on, how they proceed through our pages. So we can get that. Definitely.
So I was even more just thinking on the top page, community development, or there's other ones that are under you too that aren't necessarily community development. And so I'm just wondering then, as a result of that, have you guys been intimately involved? Because I don't hear, I hear people complain they can't find stuff. I complain I can't find stuff, or I complain I look for something that's got a pretty focused question, and I get back 10,000 different things, all in different date orders 100 years ago, and the one I want is number 5,030, even though it's the most recent one. But have you guys been intimately involved in the website as a result of that? Because I constantly hear from community development customers that the city's website is miserable. I don't hear a lot from other people, even though I imagine if you ask them, it might be true. So are you guys working hard on making sure, as I presume a big user, that will be something that works for your customers?
That's a great question. So there's a interdepartmental team working on the website replacement project. We do have representation from community development on that team. I think when the time is appropriate, and maybe it already is, I myself have not been able to keep up with all the timeline and asking for feedback on the website like you, but I know we have lots of ideas and we know what doesn't work. And we know how we want to shift providing information on our website. And so fortunately, we have a wonderful graphic designer in the community development department who is a major player in this team. And so working with her and with our other representation on the team, I'm hoping we can have a pretty strong voice in aspects that we can control. There are some things, you know, you got to make the website work for the whole city, and so often, you know, maybe a particular department's needs can't be quite met perfectly, but
or the opposite. I'm going to treat this more like a work session and just kind of just jabber away with more than questions too, because I will submit this. I will go back and find that email that is now prompting this idea too. But one of my complaints is when you get to a department or a division or an area, you still have to search by the whole city. You don't get to search within a focused area. And so you end up getting dog licenses for an address when really you're looking for planning commission minutes or a project that's on that thing.
I see.
And you follow what I mean, right? And so
Yeah.
it'd be interesting. I'll put that input in, and I put that suggestion in yours too. Is that I think that's one of the problems that, just as you said it, it's a whole city website. Well, how do you fence major traffic areas within that city? So when a person gets there and wants to find something just within that focus area, they're only stressing the system to go find it within that particular subject matter and not back to the whole city again. So
Right.
I will make that my first submission to the website team. So
There you go.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Ms. Brooks, I just had a overall question. So one of the slides, the overarching themes, said that the two perspectives on better customer service are some want easy access to in-person services and faster, consistent responses. And then the next bullet is some people want a virtual experience so robust they don't need in-person services. And then a couple slides later, the overall experience with changes, the top results were mixed. It says changes made process more complicated and time consuming, less in-person engagement creates challenges. And then others wanted saying the online services are working. So I just bring those up. So how are we working to address that balance? Because there's significant members of the community that want more online services, but there's also a good segment that need that personal staff interaction. So we can't go all one way or the other. So how are we working to try to train staff to be able to meet the needs on either way?
Right. Thank you. And it might be a little bit more of a long-winded answer, but I'm covering material I was going to later in the presentation, so I'll just do it now. So as I mentioned, we've only had these responses in our hands for not even 2 weeks, I don't think. So this is our first level analysis of it because we wanted to provide it to you as soon as possible. But we do want to dig in deeper and try to match up the type of respondent with the responses we got, because earlier, and if they answered the question, I've got a lot of experience with land development, then we want to know how those people answered the in-person versus virtual. Maybe those people are the ones most comfortable with virtual, and then we have a focus group discussion with them about how do we make the virtual services better, because you're a frequent users and you're probably more likely going to want to use those versus the homeowner who might process a permit once every 10 years. They might need in-person services more, you know, not familiar with all the changes on the website and the Acela program. So improving both is challenging because we, you know, still have the same number of staff, but I think we can get a better idea of what type of user we need to form our virtual services around, and then what's left for in-person, and how do we make sure we have the right people available at the right time of the day for those people who really need the in-person services, and still, you know, trying to do both at the same time.
Great, that's a great answer. One is I think it shows that we're going to dive deeper into the details, and then ultimately I would think this would lead to a process where we might have more efficient use of our resources as well, because if we're able to expand to a certain segment more online, which reduces their time, especially if you're dealing with land use planners who are coming in, then we're able to free up some of maybe the staff resources that they don't really necessarily need but are getting now, and free those up to move over to those who might come in once every 10 years, like you were saying, or it would actually would be more efficient use of our resources, which is great. So those are really my questions for right now. So if you'd like to move on, and thank you for this presentation.
Sure.
A lot of great information here.
I think we left off here. Let me just make sure. And yes, okay. So I'll cover the next few slides and then take another break for questions. So next area of survey topics had to do with planning applications, submitting applications online, and then our review process of planning applications. So as I mentioned, one of the improvements we made to the process, we think it's an improvement, is consolidating what were various different planning applications, supplemental information, supplemental forms into one planning application, also with some informational guides on different types of planning applications. We launched that in December. So people have been working with those for, about 8 or 9 months at this time when they took the survey. The response was mixed. About half agreed that the planning applications are better than our previous versions. So that's good to hear. Also, about half thought that the new applications and materials make it easier to understand the process. On the negative side, mostly what we heard was the application's long, which, like I said, we consolidated some various applications and supplemental forms into one application. So maybe it's too long for some of those applicants who have a very simple project, not sure that they need to fill out the entire thing. So maybe we could simplify the application and have a streamlined application for more simple projects. So that was one thing we can work on moving forward. So, right, so identifying what specific improvements about the planning application have mattered most, and then simplify the form going forward for the more simple projects. We asked about the user's experience with Acela Citizen Access. So that's the public-facing side of Acela where they submit applications to us, both planning applications and building permit and public works applications. Again, we launched that in April, directly in response to the pandemic. We had planned to do it, but not that quickly. So it was a little clunky and a little rough when we first launched it, and we're still refining it, but wanted to hear how that's been working. Over 2/3 indicate that they have used ACA successfully, and but less than 1/4 of those say that the instructions are clear and the process was smooth. So we could work on making ACA an easier user experience for our customers. We asked if we thought they would find it helpful if, as they're submitting an application through ACA, there was like a pop-up checklist that came up reminding them of everything that needed to be submitted for a complete application, because we do have that list for them on our website, but perhaps it would be even better if it was right there interactive for them to look at while they're submitting. Most of them agree that would be helpful. I think that may be not surprising, but something more we can do to improve the quality of the applications that are submitted once they get through the process of actually uploading it online. So a potential takeaway from this is to increase the usage of ACA and their satisfaction. Will require that either the user functionality of Acela is improved, and/or we just have better instructions and guidance to our customers about how to use it, and probably both would be good. Then we asked applicants about the planning application completeness letters. So when an applicant submits an application for a discretionary project, so a project that requires planning commission or staff hearing officer or design review, and that goes to discretionary decision-making body, state law requires that we review it. We have 30 days to review it for completeness, and then provide written feedback to the applicant as to whether it's complete or not. If it's not complete, list the things explicitly, what needs to be submitted or changed in order to submit a complete application. So we send these letters after we review the projects, and we've been trying to update them and make them more helpful. So this was a change in the last, not the state law is not a change. We've always had to do 30-day review, but this letter template has changed in the last year. So just more than half of the respondents agreed that the letters clearly convey the next steps in the process, which is important, that they understand the process, but a third of them disagreed with that. So that's something we need to study a little bit more. And about half agree that the letters make it easy to tell what's required for them to submit a complete application versus we do provide advisory information or what we think is helpful information to them. You know, here's a heads up, your project might need this, or here's going to be your next steps, or maybe you should check in with this department kind of thing. So it's not necessarily a completeness issue, but it's information we think is helpful. We wanted to understand if it's easy for them to know what's just helpful information versus what's absolutely required to be complete. Only about half of them believe they can tell the difference between those two things. So that might be an area we need to look at a little bit more closely. And then I'll take another break here for questions on those topics.
Any questions from Councilmember Jordan? Not seeing any. I don't have any questions. Oh, there you are. No questions? All right.
Okay, great. I'll move right along then, and Ms. Dye will take over from here. A couple of slides about the building permit.
Thank you, Ms. Brooke. We move to the next slide, please. Thanks. So we asked 3 areas. The building permit review process is the first. And the questions we asked were, do you feel your plan check corrections are relevant to your project, or do you feel like they're boilerplate project plan check corrections? And we asked if customers felt that staff responded to their questions in a timely manner, and we also asked if they felt the overall process was too long, timely. And so slightly more than half agree that staff responded to plan check corrections in a timely manner, while 39% disagreed. And more than half agree that the building permit corrections are specific to their project, while about 34% disagree. Next slide, please. So our big takeaway here was that we reevaluate our timelines for plan review times and compare them to, our takeaway was that we need to check the timelines against what they actually are, and then possibly reevaluate new policy for different timelines. Next slide, please. The next subject was surrounding our on-demand permits, and keeping in mind that almost 50% of our survey customers that completed the survey were the design professional world, so they don't really use this service. But the other 50% who did use it, 3/4 agree that it's convenient, and two-thirds agree that they were satisfied with the on-demand services, and half agree that it's faster. And approximately half or less than half expressed negative comments. Next slide, please. So the takeaway here, we really do need to have a bit more research done to determine which of the on-demand permit types are causing frustration or have potential cost implications because of more corrections in the field. And another takeaway that was to highlight on-demand users who are having a positive experience as examples. Next slide, please. And our last subject was remote inspections. And again, a majority of our survey takers are of the design professional world. So those customers that did use it appreciate it. About 3/4 say they have worked well and saved them time. And about 27% say they prefer remote inspections if given the choice. And 13% prefer in-person inspections regardless of circumstance. So this is similar to one of the other items that Ms. Brooks said, that really just maybe we need more resources to educate the public that this is an option. And that's it. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dye. Councilmember Jordan.
I'll just keep going rogue and not ask any questions, just make a couple of comments. The relationship between timely and too many corrections is, I think, troublesome. I think I could live, personally, my opinion, I could live with disgruntled people who think we're overcorrecting, as long as we were beating expectations on timely responses. When you take both of those together and you're not doing them timely, plus in somebody's perception you're overcorrecting, it seems to me to point to a problem. And so I know you're going to work on that, but in particular, I think we should be working to a timely response that frequently outperforms the expectation and doesn't just meet what we say we're going to do. That would be a goal, I think, that would be worthwhile striving for. That's my only not question comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. I don't have any further questions or comments at this point, and turn it back to Ms. Brooks. Is at the end of the presentation, or do we have another section? I think I have an old PowerPoint in front of me.
Just a couple more slides and then we'll be done. So as I mentioned, this is the results from our online survey. So we have more work to do. Wanted to discuss that, our approach to that with the committee and get some insight and feedback from you. So next steps, we'll be doing a deeper dive into the survey results. As I mentioned, trying to pair up the type of user of the land development process with the responses we got, so we have a better understanding of how we can provide better service to our different users. We also want to have some focused small group conversations with those customers around certain topics, because this survey being online was just a one-way form of communication. We asked them a question, they gave us a response, but we weren't able to have a conversation with them about it. And so we want to be able to do that on some topics that we think warrant that. And then also we want to talk with ourselves. We have ideas and ways that we want to also improve the process. Having heard from our external customers gives us an idea of where we need to focus. We can talk more internally about how we might be able to accomplish that. And also, the land development team does serve the city as its applicant sometimes. So we do want to talk to those within the city who they themselves go through the land development process and get some ideas there for improvements. Specifically, we want to focus on our counter services, and that relates to our online application submittal, and I'll talk about that in just one moment. But on the topic of small group conversations, our first takeaway of some potential topics for those small group conversations are on this slide. So electronic plan submittal and staff review of those electronic plans, we think would be a good area for topic. Small group discussion, the topic of on-demand permits, as Ms. Dye said, trying to find out those who express concern or frustration about the on-demand permits, just understanding more about it. Is it actually submitting their application online that's frustrating, or is it the resulting inspection that comes in the field? Are there more corrections as a result of that? We want to talk about drop-in or in-person counter services versus remote counter appointments, where we do it through GoToMeeting like this. Planning application and supporting materials. So the whole planning application process, 30-day review, the planning application letters, those would probably be conversations with our more frequent flyers. And then permit plan review, just a general topic around permit plan review, the correction process, the resubmittal process, and that. And then just want to end with one topic, because Counter services keeps coming up as an area where we're struggling, both I think in meeting our external customers' expectations and internally making it a sustainable amount of workload at the counter. And it's really because we have these converging services that we're now providing and have been providing since we launched Acela online application submittal. So our counter staff are currently both processing, reviewing these applications that are submitted online, going through them, working with the applicant, trying to get a complete application before it gets routed to staff. And we have the concurrent plan review by staff, which is great and can be a great time saver. In the meantime, counter staff are also still supporting the in-person appointments at the counter, the remote appointments at the counter, and email and phone and all the other normal day-to-day counter services that we had always provided. So we need to have more conversations with both our external customers and ourselves about Acela. As I mentioned, we launched ACA, that public-facing portion of Acela, pretty quickly after the pandemic. It's still not optimized. There are areas of improvement for the customer interface with Acela, and there's great areas of improvement for the back office side of Acela, where we work through processing applications, the workflow. We could be automating more of those activities, and we haven't had the time or the technical support to be able to do that. So that is definitely deserving of more conversations and resources focused at that, so that we can be providing these virtual services more efficiently and spending our time really being able to help our customers more in person and help them through the process if we weren't doing more administrative tasks, just trying to work our way through Acela. So, and then as you mentioned, Councilmember Jordan, the website, thinking about the future website design and function there to improve everybody's interface with that and availability and ease of accessing information. So that is it for our presentation. So any general questions from the committee on any of those things, or input, please, on ways to engage with more of our customers in the future, different topics that you're hearing for those small group focused conversations.
Thank you, Ms. Brooke. I have a question just on the last item in particular on Acela. So I think you mentioned it, but I just want to clarify, is one of the issues that's come up is because there is such a learning curve and there's a lot of support that comes in there, we're having staff that would otherwise be on other tasks having to really fill that, I guess, IT role is the best way to phrase it. And so given that, in looking ahead towards budgeting, I know we have limited resources in the city going in there due to our current budget circumstances. But in a case like this, where there's something that's so integral to what we're trying to do, and we put in all this effort and this time in both resources and monetary, staff resources and funding resources, is this something where we would really want to have a specific position or a part of a position really focus on being the kind of go-to person to upgrade any upgrades or anything for Acela, but also be the one to help train other staff on it? Is that something that we'd be looking at? Because where I'm going with this is, if we make all this investment and there's this one piece of it, it makes sense that could really free up other resources. That's a cost saving. So have you been discussing that component of it at all?
Mr. Chair, I'll answer what I can, and I'm not sure if Mr. Isaacson might have more to offer from his perspective, but the council did fund an additional position in the IT department about maybe a year and a half ago, focused on Acela administration, and it's been challenging to recruit and retain somebody in that position. We did have it filled for a few weeks, and that person ended up going off to take another job. In the meantime, we've been trying to backfill that with consultant contract with Gray Quarter. That company really kind of just troubleshoots the problems when they come up and supports IT in that. But we don't have somebody yet, because that position is still vacant in the IT department, to really move us ahead in terms of understanding our business practices and being able to help us optimize Acela. So we're still relying on planning and building and safety staff and public works staff to fill in, which is taking time away from actually doing land development, work. So that would be a great area of improvement, just to have somebody dedicated to helping us with the technological challenges that we've had.
Mr. Isaacson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Friedman, Councilmember Jordan. I think Renee said it very well. One thing I might add is, oftentimes with implementations of new software like Acela, there'll also be business analyst roles that join the team that are really designed to liaise between business and understanding our business practices and processes within our department and the technology, and really trying to help us optimize and get to an optimal state with our configurations and workflows, so that we are really sort of leveraging the investments we've made into these new tools to the greatest extent possible. And so when we start talking about future budgeting and additional resources to community development, those skills are something that we currently don't have, but are something worth exploring, because I think that's really what it's going to take to get us to the next stage of all of this.
Thank you both for that clarification, and for the nuance there, that we have that position, but it hasn't. It's been tough to keep it filled. And I bring this up now because I know that we're looking ahead and starting the budgeting process, but having the knowledge and the information and the capability to fully utilize Acela is such an important part of us moving forward with everything we talked about here, whether it's customer experience, timeliness, the ability to track projects better, and customer service. I think that is something that would be a priority for me, is to understand how we can maximize that, and whether it's looking at a business analyst, or whether or not it's more trying to see what we can do to help support filling that position. Just like some more information on that over the coming months of what we can do. So for now, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Jordan.
I just have some comments. Were you going to do, I could wait till after, were you going to do public comment after this? I could just wait. I just
sure,
actually
if you're, I thought you might have questions. So
not for that particular.
Yep. Okay, I will open it up to public comment. Ms. Kokinda, if you could help me here to see if anybody is raising their hand in the app.
Absolutely. So if you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And a raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down. And I have Krista Pleiser. I'm going to unmute you. If you could please unmute yourself. Okay, it looks like your microphone is live. Go ahead, you have 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Krista Pleiser. I'm with the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors. And just a couple of thoughts in that this is fantastic that this is going through. We have about 1,300 members, and so between them and their clients, they talk to us quite a bit about the process going through this department. It's great to hear that there's going to be changes on the notification. I would like to recommend that there be a phone number on the mailings, because some people don't know how to use QR codes. They don't go on the internet. We have various generations that get these. And so we need to make sure that we can have access for everybody. I do like the clean look of the notification. It's much better, not so text heavy. And the other thing that I hear a lot about, which I know Ms. Brooke did speak on, is just the customer service, and insofar as the response time. I think that that's something that also needs to really be looked at, and make sure that, you know, people are at least getting an email saying, hey, thanks for your email, your phone call. We acknowledge that we received it, and we will be getting back to you in X amount of time. Those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pleiser. Any others wishing to speak at this time?
Chair Friedman, I don't see any other hands raised. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we had Mr. Sweeney who did submit his written comments to the committee that were distributed, but no more hands are raised currently.
Okay, I will close public comment and turn it over to Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've snuck in a lot of my comments, just a couple more for staff that I've jotted down too. I agree wholeheartedly with what you heard from Eric on Acela. You know, I don't know how many years it's been now since we bought it and tried to implement it. And it still seems to me to be, while it's a tool, it's not the tool it should be, and frequently maybe more of a crutch. And I think, in my opinion, you need to be right in front of us, telling us that it's time to fix it so that it does the work that it can do. You know, there will be people who say, what's this emphasis on community development and building and whatever remodeling? But, you know, there is such a connection in the city, in the city's health between community development and both economic and community vitality. If that stalls, you look up in a couple decades and there are old decrepit buildings or parts of town, and we need to be using the tools that we can do to make the process and the experience work the best it can. I especially liked Ms. Brooke talk about talking to themselves in addition to talking to their stakeholders. We've heard this in the past that even when we talk to stakeholders, that then that is applied more in a silo type of implementation. And this talking to ourselves, I think is just as important as listening to what your stakeholders say or I say or any other council member says. You also need to make sure that you spend the time, assign the time, have the time to do the work with yourselves too, so that everybody understands, everybody's on board, everybody can implement. And then last, this hit our LDT report to council hit our long range agenda today, and I can't remember if it's in November or early December. These, oh, that won't be last. I have one more comment too. But these meetings tend to be a lot of report out, both on everything that has been done and everything that still needs to be done. I want to make sure that you have my enthusiastic support to make sure you spend enough time at that meeting with council to talk about what else you need to accomplish what you want to do, and in particular, you know, the worksheet on the LDT stuff that's running up against time, resources, or whatever reason, and that it's less about almost what you have accomplished, but what do you need council to give you, do, help, or support you to keep moving forward and to arguably tackle the most difficult parts of the tasks. And to that point, I'm just going to try and explain 3 highlighted ones on this list that was updated in the last day or two. And the first one is the 3rd line down, which is create and communicate a clear service level and process expectations. And that's only about 25% accomplished. And then it's got an icon there that says it's in progress, underway. Pretty important to me. If there's resources, as I will say with all 3 things that I've highlighted, if there's resources there involving budget, people, time, I think we want to hear about that, and what can we do to help you elevate those. The next one is in the 3rd category of color squares, and it's one of the top priorities in that category, and it's identify changes to the Muni Code and other regulations. That's also languishing down at 25% completed. And as, of course, everybody here knows, any changes to the Muni Codes, once you actually are able to get the resources to start working on that, frequently take a year or more. So those to me are important and integral to the steps you need to take. Last one is the next group down under design review process, and that is create clear, objective design guidelines for each of the design review boards. And that's way down there at 10% with a whole bunch of colored icons that are troublesome near the end of that. Dollars, time, probably ordinances. Mr. Sweeney just talked about one, and that's the compatibility issue. There are others that just continue to lead to what my perception of a run through any one of the design boards being the most troubled part of the process, that and frequently bracketed on each end by maybe a staff that is unsure what a council wants, and a council that's unsure of what's happening at design review, and then design review members who are pushed either way or are pushed no way, and don't really recognize any of those components. So again, when you get in front of us at council, what I'd like to see some emphasis on is what you need, what we can help you do to elevate up the most under-accomplished parts of this list to start moving them on a track to be accomplished. I think that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. This is why I'm so glad you're on this committee, because we get Planning Commissioner Jordan to come out on this. So appreciate that. I concur with comments by my colleague. In particular, the issue of budgeting and applying the resources that we need going forward. So how to work that within there, whether there are some efficiencies that we can achieve. And I also, or if we need to add some additional budget resources to get us to where we want to be, because this is so integral to what we do as a city, the community development processes. And we're working on this because of so many things that we're going to be coming up, such as revitalization and of downtown and other areas. So having the right system and right processes set up here will directly translate to other council priorities that are coming out there. So I am also pleased that you're going to be going into more focused micro groups and analyzing this data further down, which again will lead to some of these efficiencies that we're looking at in targeting resources to be most effective, and the efficacy of what we're doing right now. So with that, I don't really have much more to add. We had our comments and questions throughout, but I do appreciate it. The last thing I'll end with is the council meeting that's coming up is tentatively November 16th. That could change for the public, but that's about the time frame that we're estimating that these items are going to come. The Long Range Development Team Committee is going to be coming before council, the presentation. And the chart again that Councilmember Jordan showed that has the 31 items is a good starting point. I think it is a very good visual for the council, and we can really highlight some of the things that we need to work on. I think having some of the successes is great, so that the council and the public who are more engaged at a council meeting than they would be here or otherwise understands that we have made a lot of progress, but what are the big issues that are coming up that we're going to really need to prioritize as we look into the budget. And the key part of this is the next budget is going to be for the 2-year cycle. So this is the budget coming up for the fiscal year 22-23 and then 23-24 as a 2-year cycle, that we have the ability to try to look longer term and have those resources allocated. So be very interested to see how this fits in with everything else we're doing. So with that, I will close this item. And then we did talk about the next meeting items and of what we're looking at. So that's coming up. And Ms. Brooke, is there anything else before we adjourn the meeting that we need to add, or do you have, I guess, your direction that you need from us for both the next meeting? Do we have the next meeting date set?
Mr. Chair, we don't yet. We had talked internally about perhaps scheduling that sometime in January. Just December's a tough time. December might be our normal schedule to do that, but based on what we want to do following this meeting, and that we intend to check in with the full council, like you said, potentially in mid-November. I think it makes sense for this next LDTO meeting to be in January, so we have time to kind of bring all that together, have our focus group discussions, and then report all of that back to you. If that's okay with your two committee members, we can look for a date in January and then post that as soon as we know on the LDTO website. And I did also just want to note that chart that both you and Councilmember Jordan were referencing is posted on the Land Development Team Oversight Committee website too, if anyone's interested in looking at. It's called the Status of Process Improvements chart.
Great, thank you. And is today's PowerPoint going to be posted to the?
Yes, it usually is. Yes, and we can do that.
We'll get that up there. Councilmember Jordan, are you okay with the next meeting being sometime perhaps like mid-January? So come back and then we have a couple weeks to adjust and then come in middle January?
That'll work.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will be back, date to be determined, but in January, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.